Welcome everyone to another episode of the Dragonus Podcastus. This is the only show where you can find the A-Team, the Wiggles, and Kermit the Frog in the same world together. My name is Dead Ponic, purveyor of weapons and armor. If you enjoy our podcast and would like to support us, you can do so through the Patreon, my Fiverr page, and if you become a level 1 Patreon for just $3, you'll get access to our Discord server, to which you can get sneak peeks into future episodes before anyone else, and, Christmas stuff. Lady Maeve, tell them about the D&D school.
Greetings, fellow adventurers. Do you want to learn how to play D&D or become a dungeon master for your own group? I have a class for that. I also have Christmas holiday one-shots where you can save Santa from evil elves who have kidnapped him. If you're between the ages of 16 to above adult, you can play adventures with me or take classes on how to be a dungeon master, how to play, on a website called Start Play, link below the podcast. If you have kids between the ages of 7 and 16 who would like to learn how to play Dungeons & Dragons or how to Dungeon Master for their own group, they can play on a website called OutSchool, link below the podcast. You can also book me for games for special occasions like birthdays, bachelor or bachelorette parties, baby gender reveals, and more. I can also run homebrew and publish adventures for you and your group. Please check all details below the podcast. So, Dead Ponic, I hear we're going to cover the other side of the knight coin today, the sisters.
Yes, we are talking about the Sisters of Valkyria. Now, after the Knights episode, I have mentioned before the sisters multiple times in previous videos. I've gone into the details about, their weapons, the maidens overall, but I've never gone into depth as to how they are as a faction and their overall powers. And so that's what we're going to kind of explore today. And to start off, get your bingo card ready whenever we get around to finishing that. But I'm going to start off with a quote from King Fair of Tor. The Sisters are an organization that is dedicated to the protection of myself and my family. I have never known dedication to a task like theirs, more so even than the Knights. I take comfort that when my wife or daughter are in danger, the Sisters will not hesitate to do what is necessary to protect them. When I deploy the Knights to war, I expect them to hold the line or complete the job at hand, and they are feared for their efficiency and comfort in battle. When I authorize the Sisters to be deployed for war, they will make sure the enemy knows never to underestimate them and that their faith and duty are unmatched.
I'm interested to see how the sisters are going to differ in form and function from the knights. I know we covered them a little bit in the Knights episode, and we touched on a little bit of the lore briefly in the Shadow Dark Powers episode.
So as I talked about before, the Knights are charged with protecting the royal family as a whole, most specifically the king. But the sisters are the other side of that. They protect the Queen and Princess Lucy. However, this is not exclusive to them, and they're also technically a military force, and are specifically charged with also protecting, the citizens of the Kingdom of Tor, which spans multiple cities. And they also, they have their, moments where, they see somebody, they may have, a vision of the future, which is super rare, but when it happens, they might see, somebody who is super important, and they may feel the need to protect them. If a sister is detail head specifically for the king, they usually have authority, and the knights under a sister's command are generally, they hold the rank between marshal and sergeant. But when a sister is assigned detail head, and while a sister assigned to detail head will usually have the rank between captain and colonel, this is pretty significant because most knights usually hold between a sergeant and a captain.
So they're kind of outrank the knights when they're in charge. So this is kind of a separate military group that does their own missions, their own things, but they can be called upon as almost a secret service type of group for the Kingdom of Tor, correct?
Absolutely. That is their main purpose. And there's actually a good example of this would be something like, for example, the West Wing. There's a character, the Secret Service overall, they don't just protect the president. They protect, anybody on his staff. Like the one episode where CJ has to get Secret Service protection because she's getting threats. And believe it or not, that actor who plays the Secret Service agent in charge of her detail is Mark Harmon, who plays Gibbs on NCIS, though he wouldn't get that role until much later. It is often said that having a sister come to save you is a common occurrence, but seeing a sister as an angel or in an angelic form is rare, and being saved by a knight is extremely rare.
So it seems like the sisters, there's like maybe more of them. They're more common to see than the knights. What is this angel mode they go into?
Well, basically, this is a mode that when they've fully committed and they've basically given up their sense of person and they've committed themselves to their cause, which is basically in service of the Great Mother, Valkyria, they will get their wings, they'll become a full-on angel, and this is something similar to how, like, when Frodo was, on the verge of death, he saw Arwen and she was covered in this, like, glow. That's something that Lord of the Rings fans will know off by heart. It was not actually Arwen in the book, it was Glorfindel. Anyway, not the point. Basically, at this, if they see an angel, usually it's because a sister has earned their wings for the first time, or they've come in and they're on the verge of death and they perceive it as the sister being an angel. And they even have like a thing where they're like, are you an angel? And I'm like, if you know that reference, yeah, I'm not gonna repeat the scene. Anyway, what separates sisters, though, from knights is both the fact that they are not as augmented as the knights, and the powers that they get are referred to as quote-unquote gifts from their great mother, and their primary focus is usually defense and utility, but the minute that cloak comes off and their eyes start to glow, then, as the kids say, shit gets real. And that is the one thing you do not want, is for a sister to drop their cloak and have their eyes glow.
So they're more like a supernatural group. So like in Dungeons and Dragons terms, we would consider them maybe clerics or paladins. They're getting their power from a higher power. While the knights are more like the 40K Space Marines. While they're being magically enhanced instead of scientifically enhanced, it's still the same difference where they're getting upgraded organs and abilities and things like that.
It's very similar to that. In fact, the sisters could be almost similar to the Sisters of Battle from 40K, except they're not as pious, and they don't have flamethrowers and melted guns and all that. But their faith is what keeps them going, and they have their people that are like that stand out, and it's one of those things that, as you said, like that you could consider them paladins or clerics, but that's actually pretty close to what they would be in D&D terms. As for the knights, comparing them to Space Marines, I like to compare them to Custodes, but Space Marines isn't that far off. So in order to get their powers, a sister that has been fully gone through the training and reaches the end of their training has to go through the ritual of induction, where they'll drink a special potion. A maiden, which is basically a high-ranking sister, will paint special markings on their face, and their arms and back will be branded. And their back will also be branded with a mark to signify where their wings will pop out when they get them. And the arms are branded with a sword and a shield to signify their commitment to the group. And then their mind is transported to Valhalla, where they will meet the Great Mother for the first time, and she will basically grant her gift and say, she'll basically place her hand on the sister's forehead and basically say, "Arise, my child, bring forth the light of the Valkyria." And after that, they're a fully fledged sister.
Okay, so I'm going to play devil's advocate here. What do you think would happen if something goes horribly wrong in the ceremony and it fails? Do we get a dark version of the sisters, or just, they just don't get any powers whatsoever?
Well, when it happens, if Saragesh is being frisky and, decides, oh, hey, I'm gonna, interrupt this, then yeah, it is possible for a sister to be corrupted, and that's where we get the dark version of the sisters, which are basically well, they're the evil version, but they don't really like they're not like a major problem at the moment where we are as far as lore and story goes, but they are significant because it's kind of like I'm making another 40k reference to Horus Heresy, where a sister was corrupted, and they realize, well, the sisters are just a cult, and they just want to be there. Like they have these incredible powers, and they use them for non-selfish reasons. And basically these dark angels or dark sisters, if you will, they serve a higher, darker power than Saragash. Saragash is kind of like the one that kind of introduces them to the shadow in a way. So, so going into the powers themselves. So we'll start off with the utility powers. So as I said before, we get a sister when they get their gift from the Great Mother. They get enhanced attributes, which usually include enhanced strength, agility, and endurance. Not to the same extent as a knight, but enough for it to be at least a little bit significant.
So, so if so, it says she blesses her children, and I kind of misunderstood that. I took it to mean that the sisters eventually will have kids, and those kids maybe have a better chance of becoming a sister down the road with enhanced powers. And so, would the kids of a sister have better chance of becoming a sister of battle themselves, or do they have an equal chance as anybody else in the local population?
Well, ultimately it depends on your basically it's a when a sister is well when a person is selected to be a sister and go through the training process, it's not a test of your might and your insight and your wisdom. It's a test of character and if you're willing to basically guide, because another role that the sisters do is like they are like Valkyries from ancient Norse mythology. They guide the dead to Valhalla, and somebody who is willing needs to be willing to accept death as a inevitability and be able to guide the dead souls up to Valhalla and give them last rites and give them like basically entrance into Valhalla. As for children, it really depends because usually sisters they will settle down, they will get married and have kids, but most of the time their kids are more they don't usually make the decision. Like the parents won't make the decision for them to join or go through the training because it is dangerous, keep in mind, and it is a pretty hard life. It's kind of like it's almost like the training of a Jedi. Like to walk the Jedi path and walking the sister path is a very hard life. It's also one that you don't get many luxuries. The one luxury you do get is that you get some sense of fulfillment when you successfully defeat a threat. And also because you are a military force, you will be expected to go into war. So the
So
other
not many family lineages mixed in here.
Pretty much, yeah. So the next one is enhanced reflexes. This is basically only triggered when a sister is in a combat situation and needs like just a small amp. And they basically enter a Zen mode where while they can't move as fast as a knight, they're still just faster than a regular human. It's kind of like that scene from The Last Samurai where Tom Cruise's character, he just kind of like time slows down and then it speeds back up to regular and he's moving really fast and he basically takes out everybody, and then they basically replay everything in slow motion so that we the audience understand what was going on at the time. It's kind of like that.
So in D&D terms, this would count as hasted, where the character would get extra speed or they could have an extra action on their turn. How often can the sisters go into this Zen mode each day? Is it unlimited? Are they limited to once a day? Are they limited to like 2 or 3 times a day based on their level of sister?
Well, it's considering this only happens during combat, it only happens when they're facing like overwhelming odds or they're in a situation where like they're being ambushed and it's like one sister against say like 20 guys, and well, good luck to those 20 guys because Now, this is an involuntary trigger, keep in mind also. But when it happens, the sister will basically, after they've basically slaughtered the 20 guys, they'll kind of look around and like, did I do that kind of thing? But then it'll
So
become,
it's
oh, sorry.
so it's kind of like a berserker in Norse mythology where they'll go into the rage. They won't remember what they're doing during the rage. And then they'll wake up and go, oops, did I do that?
Oh God, the Urkel thing. Yeah, basically that kind of thing. Yeah, it's kind of like that. Um, so the next major one is the White Lighter sense. For the Charm fans, you should know who a White Lighter is, but when a sister gains this power, they are able to basically sense the location of somebody by focusing on their aura. Although it should be noted that mental and psychic barriers and anything related to the shadows can actually block this. And it's not like they can just hone in on the person and know, oh, they're at this location. It's more like they get a general sense of where they are overall. And it does not have a range limit unless it's on another plane. Then
And my question is, D&D's kind of fallen out of using the alignment system for pretty much everything. It used to be super important that only certain things could happen if you were good, evil, or neutral. But let's say they're looking for someone. Do they have a better chance of finding someone based on their alignment, such as good or neutral aligned people are clearer in the sight and evil aligned are dimmer, or does it not matter at all?
they can't sense demons or anybody of evil alignment, though they do get like a sense like something's off with a person if they if they do actually like want to focus on that person. But it's generally easier for somebody who is good natured, or what we refer to as innocent, to be picked up a lot easier. So the next power, I consider this a power, but it can be something. It comes with training, but basically it's willpower and protection from corruption. So a sister would be able to shrug off shadow corruption through both strengthening their mind and also their willpower. However, there are some limits, and it's very it ultimately it's based on the person also.
So would there be a certain limit of shadow that each sister could just basically shrug off, ignore? So if you're a lower level sister, maybe it's a challenge rating 2, and if you're a medium level, maybe it's up to challenge rating 5 or 6, and then the higher levels can even like shrug off a demon.
Well,
Or is it the same for everybody?
so there actually are limits. So like you said, like lower level shadow demons, that any sister could shrug off. Medium level, it does take more training and more concentration and more willpower. But if we're talking like god level, like somebody like Saragash, yeah, you're not going to be able to shrug off corruption for very longer. But also, the corruption also differs in its intensity. Like if it's very subtle corruption, then a sister could basically shrug that off no problem. But if it's like blatant, in your face, life or death situation, then it really depends. The This next power is actually kind of interesting, and it's a reference to Thor: Love and Thunder, which I really like that movie. Well, I like one part of that movie, but basically this it's basically just summoning their Valkyrie armor. A fully fledged sister, just before going into battle, will often conjure a brief lightning storm, which, strikes them and transforms them into their full armor. And even Brave Thor buns their hair to keep it out of their face. It's like that scene in Endgame where Thor's like, he's like summons Mjolnir and Stormbreaker, and then the lightning strikes him and he's in his armor and his beard is all braided to keep it out of his face, kind of thing. I thought that was a really neat touch.
So it's also harkens back to the Magic Girl transformation where their armor gets on and their hair gets done and ribbons like that. And medieval warfare, it's a good idea to keep your hair out of the reach of your enemies. If they can grab your head, they can grab your hair, they can control which direction you're going to be in. And a lot of good fighters in ancient time, men and women, would actually wear their hair down and loose as kind of a taunt to the enemy. Basically to say, I am so good, you're not even going to get your hands on me. You'll be dead before that happens. So, combat practicality, yeah, put your hair up. Don't let people get it. As soon as they grab your hair, they've got control of your head.
Yeah, it's kind of like I can't believe I'm making this reference. Sailor Moon, or
Yes.
Sailor Moon or Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman, well, Linda Carter version of Wonder Woman, where she like does like the spinning. And her hair is actually, yeah, her hair would be when she's not in costume. Her hair is usually braided, but when she's in costume, it's loose, which I thought was interesting. Um, it is they actually do sometimes do the Wonder Woman spin, just to be cheeky.
Yes.
So,
It's kind of like, wait, I will fight you in a minute while I go do this dramatic armor putting on that takes 5 seconds, but it should be intimidating to you because usually it takes 5 minutes to put all this on.
oh God, yes. Thank goodness for anime logic, eh?
Yes, definitely.
So, as I talked about before, a sister will eventually get their wings, but they have to earn their wings, obviously, either by facing a special trial, overcoming great adversity, or willingly putting themselves in the line of fire to protect their charge. Obviously, they allow a sister to fly, and anybody who has seen a flying sister will, as I said before, might mistake them for an angel, and they are often accompanied by a holy aura. It's kind of actually another comparison I like to make is Mercy from Overwatch. She kind of reminds me of like a Valkyrie in a way. Even in her trailer, she actually that does remind me of that. And as I said
This
before,
remi-
it's very interesting actually.
this reminds me very much of the old Red Bull commercials where someone would chug a Red Bull, the wings would pop out. Red Bull gives you wings. So we have them doing the spin, the Linda Carter spin, chugging a Red Bull, and then they pop out fully armored, wings deployed, ready for combat. So mechanically, fly speed in D&D. Would you give them like normal walking speed? Would they be faster than that? You know, most people that have wings now, they're giving them 30 feet of movement for the Aarakocra. Dashing would give you 60 feet. When the bird people first came out in D&D, they gave them like 50, 60 feet of movement normally, and it was a mess because they were outflying the team. So they had to dial that back. I think the most latest iteration of Aarakocra, they have normal walking speed for their fly speed. Unless you're a monk, and then it's crazy speeds again.
Oh gosh, Naruto run with wings, dear lord.
Yes.
Basically, the idea is that basically a sister would technically need like some height in order to like take off. They can't just take off from the ground. Although this has happened before. It kind of reminds me of you remember that old show Gargoyles?
Yeah, I loved
Oh, I
gargoyles.
love that. I love that show. Basically, Goliath, he cannot like take off from the ground. He does need height. It's kind of like that. There are like higher level sisters can take off from the ground. It really depends on where you're sitting at in terms of rank and power and all that. So,
Our Lady of the Flying Squirrel.
yeah,
You
pretty
have to
much.
climb the tree and then jump.
Yeah, pretty much. So the last power is not really a power, but I consider it. But basically, this is sometimes sisters will be blessed with immortality, the power of regeneration, or just eternal beauty for some reason. They can be given this ability after taking a fatal wound. They can also gain eternal beauty. They'll have the angelic glow, and sometimes they'll even be like stated to be angels even when the aura isn't active. It's the eternal beauty thing is like they don't give it out willy-nilly kind of thing.
So there's a fun discussion in the D&D communities of if your adventure is just constantly chugging healing potions that the normal person of the world doesn't get access to, basically that effectively makes them immortal. They can't die if they don't go to 0 hit points and make the 3 failed death saves. So there's like some lore going on where this adventure is 300 years old. They're human, so they should have died at like maybe 60, 80. And they're like, leaving their village because they can no longer stand being around people they no longer know, and like all of their children are in their 80s, and you know the healing potion just keeps regenerating you and giving you immortality. So with this healing ability, I know it heals themselves. Are they also able to heal other people? And I believe we did mention that a little bit, that they do have healing powers.
They do. They can't unless they get permission. They can't pass on their regeneration or their immortality. It's if they do get permission, it's kind of like how again, Arwen, she has like that whole thing where she says, "What grace has given me, let it pass to him." She's basically kind of passing on a little bit of her immortality to the person so that they don't, die from really strange circumstances. Um, yeah, as when we get to, we're gonna get to it in a minute, but yeah, they do have healing powers. So going into defensive powers, they have their shield of faith, which is basically it's just a bubble of shield that is basically it's generated by their faith in the Valkyrie, and it can ward off demons, shadows, and so there's even very powerful attacks. It is generated by faith, hope, and most importantly love, the hope to persevere and the indirect compassion that they have for their charge. And basically the Wonder Woman effect, as I like to call it, basically where Wonder Woman, she is defined by her compassion, and that compassion gives her power to defeat her villains.
Um, a fun idea that you might consider for the higher level sisters, there's a awesome spell that paladins get called Spirit Guardians. It basically turns you into a living bug sapper for all of your enemies. It would be really fun if the higher level Valkyries could have this mixed into their Shield of Faith, where when something like, let's say a shadow folk, shadow spawn, bumps into the shield, zap, they're instantly dead.
Yeah, it works like that.
Just take a lot of damage.
Yeah, it works something similar to that, except there's no zap effect. It's just basically they touch it and they get immolated and they get sent back to, well, the shadow realm, basically. Um, so yeah, okay, so the healing. So through channeling, their love and compassion and all that, and channeling the Nordic powers, they're able to heal a larger variety of injuries. However, not all wounds can be healed. Some actually do require actual surgery. And it kind of works like a paladin's lay on hands, except it actually heals a lot more, and it's not conjured by the paladin's oath or their dedication to their deity, or like a cleric's dedication to their deity. It's more of a, I want to save this person, and I'm willing to basically almost use my life force as a source of power to heal that person in a way.
And we have good news for those of you who are playing characters in the D&D world that use Lay on Hands or Healing Word. In the 2024 update, they have increased the amount of healing you get to do. Instead of one dice, you get to do two. So for the sisters, would you say that they use a six-sided dice, eight-sided dice, 10-sided dice for their healing ability? Like, how powerful is this healing going to be?
I would say it is roughly about a D12 in terms of healing. But they get mechanically speaking, they would get bonuses to this. So they can almost they could actually bring somebody back from 0 hit points or from the brink of death, although they can't resurrect somebody. That is the limit.
Okay, so if they're already making death saves, are they too far gone? Or could they still bring somebody back if they're making death
If
saves?
they're making death saves, I would say yes, they could bring them back. But if they fail a death save like 3 times and they're just dead, they can't bring them back. Um,
Save your diamonds, people.
yeah, yeah, pretty much. So this is the only offensive power that they technically have. It is channeling lightning. So when a sister is guided by the Great Mother and without the fear of death, as I mentioned before, this also plays into their Valkyrie armor summoning bit, but they can actually channel pure Nordic lightning to do a bunch of things like destroy shadows, power up their weapons, transform into their Valkyrie armor, and even make a shield. And this is not regular magical lightning like wizards or sorcerers have. This stuff actually hurts, and there are a lot of people who fear this because of how it affects like evildoers, like undead, fiends, shadows, that kind of thing.
So is this kind of like the knight ability where they were able to summon lightning but it doesn't affect the good and innocent, like you could shoot it right through them and they're fine? Or does this hurt anybody regardless?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't hurt good or innocent people. Although there have been creative uses, like you can use it as an emergency defibrillator. Though where we're sitting in technologically speaking, I don't think defibrillators would exist here. But you could theoretically use it as like you could theoretically use the lightning to restart somebody's heart if you were trained to recognize that their heart is stopped. Um, I like to compare the sisters a lot to somebody like Hawk Girl. Believe it or not, that's actually another good comparison. There is actually a episode where John Stewart, the Green Lantern, he goes through an explosion and it actually stops his heart. And basically, Hawk Girl has to use the mace and channel the lightning through the mace into uh, John in order to basically restart his heart. That's kind of how I see it. So for this last little bit, I wanted to kind of talk about legendary stories that have been told over the years. Some of them are, you might recognize, some of them are, I've told many stories like these before, but these ones are the most significant. So the first one is what is the Angel of Taun. So Taun is the lake city. A maiden was in the city of Taun for some important reason, not really important. But the sky basically became dark, despair filled the city, and the maiden saw a massive army of shadows and demons just beelining for the city. So she goes outside the walls by herself, with armed only with the spear of Valkyria, and has her "You shall not pass" moment. Except instead of quaking the earth, she basically puts a massive shield of light around the city that remains to this day.
So this is probably a silly question, but does the dome still keep the shadows out to this day?
Yes, it does actually. It stops all evil, most evil beings, except for evildoers who are able to hide this. This is it's more of a holy shield, and the dome is basically everybody knows it's there, but it's just you can't see it until it actually like activates, and when a shadow tries
Lights up like a bug.
it is
Lights up like a bug zapper.
it is a bug zapper essentially. It is actually like that.
A plot hook that you could use potentially could be that the city is worried there's something wrong about the dome. It's going to come down. It's going to crash. Now the dome could be completely fine. It's good for another 1,000 years. But the city officials don't know that. They're just panicking. And they might like call the adventurers out to come up with some way to reinforce the dome or add magic to it, something like that. But, there's nothing to do. It's perfectly fine. Or it could be failing depending on how much urgency you want to put in.
Well, it was basically that maiden was actually she was channeling the full power of the Valkyrie, so it's basically staying there indefinitely. Now, there have been chinks in the armor, but they're so tiny you probably wouldn't even notice it, and it would take like a full blast of shadow magic just to like even just touch the shield, or even just to like just break the shield in half, or break it down basically. Kind of a if you permit me to say this, basically basically Voldemort using the Elder One to blast the shield at Hogwarts kind of thing. It basically, the shield stops most conventional attacks, but then the minute you have like a concentrated beam, it just gets demolished, basically.
Okay, so if the powers of evil feel strongly enough about it, they could take it down, but they don't care about it yet.
Yeah, pretty much. So this next one is Valkyria herself when she was immortal versus the demon dragon. Before she actually ascended and basically became a god, she was a mortal warrior who defended the land from great evils. And one of these evils was Maleficent. Maleficent had tricked the mortal fool into allowing her to cross into the mortal plane. She tore through the land, destroying anyone and anything in their path, and putting up thorn bushes everywhere for some reason. And then Valkyria basically stood in her path, and this is the Sleeping Beauty moment comes in here, and this is where the movie actually becomes much more interesting. Now shall you deal with me, O servant of light, and all the powers of hell. And then she turns into the big dragon.
I absolutely love this scene with Maleficent when she goes full dragon. Honestly, I was cheering her on instead of the prince because I'm like, yes, go. You are the actual ruler of the land. The king and queen are pretty weak. Just take over the place. Fun fact, they used to have a Maleficent the Dragon float at Disney World. However, they kept running into the problem. It would breathe real fire during the parade. Well, at least 2 times I know of, probably more, just catch on fire middle parade, and they'd have to stop everything to put the fire out. So unfortunately, they had to retire it. For a while, they just had it without the fire, but then I guess it had too many mechanical problems. But it was cool when it was going around breathing fire into the air. But yeah, Maleficent is top choice for me for villain. I love her.
I like Maleficent a lot too, because actually the whole plot, basically her whole thing is basically she didn't get invited to the christening, which if you did I believe it was in medieval times, if you didn't get invited to a christening, that was a major insult, and that was actually cause for war. So
not to mention she's a fae. You invite the fae to everything or you're in big trouble.
I mean, the three fairies got invited, so why didn't she? I mean, so
huge insult.
Yeah, so Maleficent turns into her dragon form, and Valkyria puts up a hell of a fight despite her, not being technically properly equipped to deal with a 20-foot tall demonic dragon. That was until, divine intervention came along and blessed her sword to be able to strike down Maleficent. Sword of light, fly swift and sure, that evil die and good endure.
And I know we've covered this sword in our podcast about the shadows and shadow spawn. And this sword could be a very interesting plot hook. It's almost like, Excalibur and the King Arthur legends. And there could be an interesting plot hook where the heroes have to go find it. Maybe it got misplaced. Maybe the sisters have it and they don't know that. And they're set up by an evil patron to go get it for nefarious purposes. But basically go after the mythical sword. This is almost like King Arthur and the Holy Grail, Monty Python that we talked about in the last podcast. Arthur, go get the Grail. And he's like, sure, Lord, I will go do that. No questions asked.
Well, it is funny that you mentioned the whole Excalibur thing, though the sisters do have the sword, although it's not the true sword. They made a copy of it, basically. The real sword is with Valkyria when she ascended, but the sword that the sisters have in their temple, in their big vault, is basically, it's considered a holy artifact, and it kind of acts like the Sword of Gryffindor, although it doesn't have some of the weird shenanigans surrounding it, like being able to pull it out of a hat, but it does present itself to a sister when both their faith is, like, unquestionable and in a time of great peril. So you could say, the sword can sense that and like, oh, gotta go help the sister because she's battling an evil, and it'll just kind of like, it'll just appear out of the sky and pierce the ground. It's like, oh hey, a sword, how about that? And usually
strange women lying in ponds is no system of government.
Yeah. But usually, like, Valkyria herself will like speak to the sister and say, use this sword, this is basically, I'm giving you my power through this sword. And the sword is like Excalibur, it can do a lot of cool things. It also kind of functions like the Master Sword from Legend of Zelda in a way. You kind of have to also earn it in a way, basically.
It's dangerous to go alone. Take this.
Pretty much. So Valkyria chucks the sword at Maleficent. The blow from the sword strikes her heart and reverts her back to normal, and she got banished back to hell. Satan saw this, and cursed Maleficent to forever feel the sting of the sword whenever she was in close proximity to it. no matter the situation, to such a point where she is actually, believe it or not, afraid to go into her dragon form because of this incident.
So I know we just covered where the sword is currently. It's with Valkyria, and all that good stuff. So yeah, if Maleficent breaks out again, it's a very strong possibility that they'll bring out the rolled up newspaper, aka the sword, and smack her on the snout and say, "No, no, bad dragon."
Basically, and well, there has been a moment where I can't believe I'm bringing this up, but the Megazord has actually had access to it. We'll get to that little shenanigan in another episode. But basically, the Megazord, because it was being piloted as part of the 5-man team. It was being piloted by a sister. They were able to access the sword and use it as kind of like a finishing blow kind of thing. Um, we'll get to the Power Rangers episode at some other time, but needless to say, this is one of the only times that the big giant robot has come into the picture, and this is basically Mecha Godzilla versus Godzilla, if you will.
Classic battle, classic.
Pretty much. So the next story, these next last little couple stories here are basically what I like to call the Valkyrie Spartan stories. If you know your Spartan history, you'll know that they were like pretty much the original creators of the one-liner, but these are my particular favorites. So the first one is not far from the site where the MASH 4077 stands, where their camp is basically. There's a small cemetery that is guarded by a very few chosen sisters, and this is considered to be holy ground. A great battle took place here many, many, many years ago. 500 sisters stood against an overwhelming force, and so the enemy leader at the time rode forth and basically called out, "Maidens, lay down your weapons." Diplomatic proceedings ended very quickly with a spear sailing from the sisters' position straight into the enemy commander's chest, and their response, these were the Galatins at the time. "Galatins, come and get them." 300 reference here, which I really like. No, this is Spartan moment, unfortunately. So, although they do have a well in Tor, I guess you could do a "this is Sparta" moment.
This is Sparta!
Actually, that was invented for the movie. The real quote was, the messenger told Leonidas that Xerxes demanded earth and water, and his response was, "Dig it out for yourselves," and he actually threw him into the well. Let's see here. The next story is during one of the first battles of the War of the Blood Moon, the Taurian general and a sister that was accompanying him were basically exchanging terms with one of the Taurian generals, and he declared, "If I invade your lands, your feeble army will be decimated, your cities will fall, and none shall be spared." The sister walked up to him and replied with one word, "If." And then she just walked out of the tent.
Reminds me of the Disney Hercules movies where Pain and Panic lost baby Hercules after failing to kill him, and they're like, "He's gonna kill us if he finds out." If. I can do if. And also, if you want our spears, you're gonna have to pry them out of our cold dead hands or your cold dead bodies, whichever comes first.
Pretty much.
Probably the latter.
Yeah, and, well, the sisters held off the Galatins for several hours, and they actually came out victorious, although they did lose a lot of forces. And that's why that site is considered to be sacred. Later on, that same general and the same sister were negotiating with another general, and the general asked, "Are you so weak that you would send your women to fight your wars?" The general raised an eyebrow and responded, "Clearly you don't know our women." The sister, hearing the general's remark, walked up to the Taurian general and clocked him in the face. And her line, "Boring conversation anyway."
Yeah, my question to that is, I don't think this person has ever seen women fight. They fight dirty. They fight viciously. They fight in an intelligent manner. Like, they may not take you out today, but you're on their list. They'll get you later. Um, And Lord forbid you said something mean about their family or their children or anything in those realms, because they are not going to forgive you. Um, and they have a very high tolerance to pain, so they can outlast most of the warriors on the field. Uh,
God forbid that sister is an orc.
yeah, that's obviously he hasn't seen any orcs fight because I believe you said in this world that the female orcs are, just as combat ready as the males, which is very cool.
You could also say they're almost like the Amazons a little bit, though depending which version of the Amazons we're talking about differs greatly. But yeah, so they're kind of, although the knights do are pretty famous and they're, the most well seen when it comes to protecting the king, the sisters are the ones you're going to see more often, and their reputation is both well deserved and well respected. It's one of the reasons why you might be afraid of the knights going to war, but God forbid that the sisters go to war and they have their battle paint that they paint on, and they have various reasons why they would go to war and put that battle makeup on. It's more of a intimidation thing. It's basically saying we're coming to get you, basically, kind of thing.
It's the Mushu in Milan. Let's see your war face.
Pretty much, yeah. Anyway, so that's the sisters and their reputation and all that. What are your thoughts before we actually wrap up here?
Well, I know in the future we're going to be doing a story session with the sisters and something they go into. I'm very intrigued by this set of women warriors. It'll be interesting to see how they interact with the world around them and how kind of they operate in storyline and, what kind of shenanigans they're going to get up to.
And as I've said, if the cloak and the glowing eyes happen at the same time, basically you're in trouble. But if just the cloak comes off, not so bad, but you still got to deal with them and that kind of thing. They're scary when you piss them off. And one other thing is that they don't tolerate the whole you know sexism and misogyny and all that, because they're quite capable. And as I've kind of highlighted with these stories, they know how to get their point across pretty much.
Oh, yep. I'm interested in seeing them in the future in storyline, and we'll keep fleshing out this world. And if anybody has questions about the sisters, the knights, the shadow spawn, please put them below. If you want to do any artwork for the sisters or the knights, post it to the Discord if you follow the Patreon, and we look forward to everyone's questions and ideas.
Yep. So next week we will be doing our first story session. It'll be relatively simple, but stay tuned for that, and we'll see you guys next time.
See everyone on the flip side.